Sure, I think good morning everybody. There's probably two aspects to retail, and the things that are happening that can be controlled by retailers and the things that can happen that aren't necessarily in the retailer's control. So if I touch very quickly on the first one and then move to some of the economic impacts, I think firstly, retail is undergoing what I think the third big revolution of the last 100 years. In the 50s we had the advent of self-service retailing, where people moved from behind the counter and people then served themselves, and that was the Pratts in Victoria and the Frasers in Victoria, and what we saw was that big change where the shopkeeper really moved towards self-service. And then in the 80s we saw the big change with the advent of data through scanning instead of price marking, where suddenly this great stream of data and with that came FPOS and a number of initiatives that became technology driven for transactions. And now we're seeing this third phase, which is the digital disruption, the same disruption that's moved through the media industry, that's moving certainly through the retail industry, and will probably now move into other areas such as health at a faster rate. And if you look what's happened in the retail industry, the digital disruption has been about the internet, digital, World Wide Web, electronic marketing, and we've seen a very quantum change occur. So retailers obviously face already a significant period of having to juxtaposition their business and a very significant period of change and investment that's required. So I think that's the first sort of factor to take into account. And then retailers beyond that measure the economy really in very simple terms, whether we're going to get tailwinds or whether we're going to get headwinds. And I think to some extent the slides that we've seen are very much indicative of what we're seeing at the market at the moment. And what do I mean by that? I think firstly, if you look at the consumer that we're dealing with, and we have 5 million Myer One customers, and we get some very, very interesting data from them. We're seeing them as being a lot more frugal. We're seeing in the focus groups them very concerned about what's happening in the economy, particularly things like the cost of education, the cost of healthcare, and constantly coming up is the amount of money they don't get back from their healthcare provider. We're seeing significant issues that they're talking about in regard to the cost of electricity and gas. They're seeing significant issues worried about employment levels. And if I quote from one of the focus groups I was watching recently, a young lady said, "I'm really worried about the pigs." And the focus group guy said, "What do you mean?" Said, "I don't know, it's Portugal, it's Ireland, it's Greece, it's something. I don't know, but it's going to have a big effect on us." And we constantly see this uncertainty in the economy causing them to increase their saving rate. And I think from a saving rate perspective in discretionary retail, it has a significant impact. I mean, if you go back 10 years, for every $100 we earned, we were spending $100.50. And that was great. We loved that. That was the time of our life. Now, for every $100 we earn, we're spending 90 cents. So get it out the bank and get it into Myer for me. Could you do your very best? But I'd add as part of that, we're seeing that saving for a rainy day. That concern, is my house price going to go down? Is the government policy going to change again? Am I worried about what's going to happen from a superannuation point of view? So I don't pretend to add to Alan's numbers, but I will say that from a retail point of view, there's been constant retail growth over the last 13 years of about 4%. And that's despite significant deflation that's occurred. And we will see deflation in retail move ahead in a number of areas. I think the advent of international competitors into the market, whether you think of, in our case, it's H&M, it's Zara, it's Topshop, and if you think of Costco and Aldi, the continued deflation that's going to occur, particularly as the advent of private label, you're going to see a lot less dollars through the till in retail. And the only sort of hope for inflation is the impact of China. And as the Pearl River Delta becomes more expensive to procure from, and people diversify into Vietnam and Cambodia, Malaysia and Burma, we're starting to see now an impact on or pressure on prices of input prices coming in from product to Australia. So you've got a combination of deflation as competition means you're selling a dollar note for 95 cents. And then in addition to that, you've got the advent of what's happening with a potential inflation coming from overseas over the next few years. And finally, I'd add to that the threat of the internet means that globalisation of prices is also having a significant impact as well. So if I take our cosmetic business, which is our best growth business at the moment, that has deflated by about 5 or 6% as we've harmonised prices to be the same price as it is in the US and the UK. And we're starting to see that through a number of areas. So Australia becomes in retail more globally competitive. Australia in retail becomes under pressure from cost input prices overseas. We've got a consumer that's incredibly fragile, and we see a front page paper headline of what's happened in the Ukraine or a front page headline of the budget, and you can almost watch and follow your sales on a daily basis. As an old retailer, we used to have nice consistent sales in retail, you know, up a couple of percent, maybe 1%, a bad day was down 1. Now we see wild swings based on equity markets, the news on the front page of the paper, and we see consumers that are very, very, very fragile. And I think the budget showed that. I mean, the day the budget hit was a demonstrative day for most retailers, and as you talk amongst retailers, that week was a pretty poor week, and it's taken a while to recover that confidence back. So fragile consumer, a digital disruption, and certainly no headwinds and no tailwinds with some significant cost pressures beyond us are probably an overall summary.
It's interesting too whether maybe the perspective on whether the consumer is becoming better informed or there's far more information, the consumer is actually in some ways less informed and sort of reacts very negatively very, very quickly to things that perhaps don't have a fundamental impact on their day-to-day.
Incredibly smart. I mean, there's no doubt the consumer now has so much information that they can check a price in a moment in the store. They can make sure that you know, the quality, anything from the quality of the product to the price they pay, to the competitive prices, to the how you use the product. You know, retailers have had to lift their sites significantly in not only service but information as well.